This is Federalist 30, Part 2. I'll start at the very beginning. It has been already observed that the federal government ought to possess the power of providing for the support of the national forces, in which proposition was intended to be included the expense of raising troops, of building and equipping fleets, and all other expenses in any wise connected with military arrangements and operations. But these are not the only objects to which the jurisdiction of the Union, in respect to revenue, must necessarily be empowered to extend. It must embrace a provision for the support of the national civil list. These are the civilians that will be working for the government. National civil list. For the payment of the national debts contracted or that may be contracted, and in general for all those matters which will call for disbursements out of the national treasury. The conclusion is that there must be interwoven in the frame of the government a general power of taxation in one shape or another. So this Federalist, as we talked about, will be focusing on revenue, taxation. How are we going to collect taxes, and who and what are we going to tax to get enough revenue in the treasury so that the government can take care of its business? It's not just the troops that we need, it's the fleets we need to have, the navy we need to have. It's the civilians, the bureaucracy that will be working for the government. All of these need to be paid for. Plus, one important thing is that we have debts to pay. The government had to borrow a lot of money to run the Revolutionary War. And now we have to pay the people, whether they are inside the United States or outside of the United States, to pay our debts. And one thing, he doesn't go in depth here in explaining, but other places he will, not in this paragraph anyways. He says, when you have a contract of any sort, let's say when you borrow money, if you don't pay it back, if you break your contract, then your credit will be bad. And a government must be able to borrow money, especially in the times of emergency. So if we do not tax properly, we will not have enough revenue to pay our debts, to take care of the expenses of the government. So this issue of paying back the debts is extremely important. Remember the book I have shown you earlier, or the author I showed you, Woody Holton's book, Unruly Americans? That's one of the things that that book focuses on. And it's important to keep this idea in mind. Money is, with propriety, considered as the vital principle of the body politic, as that which sustains its life and motion, and enables it to perform its most essential functions. So money to government is almost like a vital part, it's almost like the heart or your lungs as far as your body goes, except he says body politic in respect to your government. A complete power, therefore, to procure, means to get, a regular and adequate supply of it, as far as the resources of the community will permit, may be regarded as an indispensable ingredient in every constitution. From a deficiency in this particular, one of two evils must ensue. In other words, if we don't take care of the taxation from a deficiency, from a shortcoming in this subject matter, in taxation and revenue, one or two evil things must ensue. Either the people must be subjected to continual plunder as a substitute for a more eligible mode of supplying the public wants. There you have to constantly go and force people to give their belongings, to plunder their belongings, take it by force, or the government must sink into a fatal atrophy and in a short course of time perish. Or your government would be so weak, it's almost like a dying body, which will eventually perish and die. The next paragraph says, in the Ottoman or Turkish Empire, the sovereign, though in other respects absolute master of lives and fortunes of his subjects, has no right to impose a new tax. The consequence is that he permits the bashas or governors of provinces to pillage the people without mercy, and in turn squeezes out of them the sums of which he stands in need, to satisfy his own exigencies and those of the state. In other words, he won't force the people to pay taxes, but all those governors that work for him or have to worry about him, those guys, those people are the ones that go and pillage people, plunder people, steal from their people by force, and then give the Ottoman Emperor some share of it. In America, from a like cause, the government of the Union has gradually dwindled into a state of decay, approaching nearly to annihilation. Who can doubt that the happiness of the people in both countries would be promoted by competent authorities in the proper hands to provide the revenues which the necessities of the public might require? So if we find competent people to take care of the Department of Treasury, people who will deal with the finances of the government, they can create a good situation where the government won't need any money. People are happy because they're not going to be taxed a lot. So there will be some good policies put in place. But he says, right now, under the government we have, under the Articles of Confederation, it is a mess. As we know, the states are not paying their fair share. People are getting away, getting by without paying taxes when they can, because we make requisitions. We require, but we don't force the states to get the money. So sometimes they pay on time, sometimes they don't, and this has created a lot of headache for us. The next paragraph, the present confederation, feeble as it is intended to repose in the United States, an unlimited power of providing for the pecuniary wants of the Union, but proceeding upon an erroneous principle, it has been done in such a manner as entirely to have frustrated the intention. Congress, by the articles which compose that compact is that first constitution, as has already been stated, are authorized to ascertain and call for any sums of money necessary in their judgment to the service of the United States, and their requisitions, if conformable to the rule of apportionment, are in every constitutional sense obligatory upon the states. These have no right to question the propriety of the demand, no discretion beyond that of devising the ways and means of furnishing the sums demanded. But though this be strictly and truly the case, though the assumption of such a right would be an infringement of the Articles of the Union, though it may seldom or never have been avowedly claimed, yet in practice it has been constantly exercised and would continue to be so as long as the revenues of the Confederacy should remain dependent on the intermediate agency of its members. What the consequences of this system have been is within knowledge of every man, the least conversant in our public affairs, and has been amply unfolded in different parts of these inquiries. Amply unfolded means here it's been explained in other Federalist Papers. It is this which has chiefly contributed to reduce us to a situation which affords ample cause both of mortification to ourselves and a triumph to our enemies. So this system of requisitions, in theory we thought it was good, but experience has shown us that it is awful. We can't get the money we need to run the government, and our enemies love it because they know if we can't run the government right, pay our debts right, we're going to stay weak, and sooner or later they'll be able to either invade us or take advantage of us and buy our resources for cheap, not let us to trade with them fairly, even plunder our land if they can get away with it. So he says we've already tried this system that to get the money for the national government, we ask the states. He says this intermediate, that's what he's talking about. The states they go in between people and the federal government. He says we need to get rid of that.